Hello and welcome to Real Hi-Fi Help. Well, let's have a nice look at this video, Audio Hi-Fi Gear Sins number 2. I would like to encourage people to watch the entire thing just so you get all the value that you need in order to deal with these situations, because that you can save potentially a lot of money. Again, you can't do this with all the gear on the market, but you can do it with some gear. And the gear that I know that you can do it with, I will try and make videos with that. There will also be other types of gear that you yourself can find and can possibly get something more out of that gear. I can't promise that it will be better. Sometimes when you upgrade older gear with better components, it actually gets worse. So I'll just try and keep in mind the ones that I know that can be upgraded and sound potentially a lot better. Well, let's dig into it. And Kayan, they make some okay, interesting amps. I'm not too crazy about the brand, but you usually get a decent amount of value for your money. And yeah, I feel that some of their amps, like this particular one I found, they have these almost really bad lowest class terminals. Not the worst, but you know, we're down there. We're probably around a 2 or a 3 out of 10, where the Sugden A21 terminals are almost like a 1, really bad. So these typically make the sound just very simple, puffy or harsh, depending on tube, transistor gear, whatever. They're just very unsophisticated, and it's almost like having a lot of fat blocking the system, just overgeneralizing the sound, making it just too simple, unevolved in generally. So you generally want as good as possible to have pretty good terminals. Yeah, but you have to keep it within a certain safe zone. So that's what we can do with this one. And you know, they have some decent other plugs over here. These are only like the speaker terminals that I've been able to find. And yeah, with an app like this, you don't really need to do any inlet plugs or other stuff. I mean, it's all pretty much well balanced for the K-in sound, and you could easily just keep it the way it is and just change the tubes. It's up to you. So you don't have to do this. But I've heard it before where it did significantly improve the sound. So it just sounded a bit more 3D, a bit more open, a bit more sophisticatedly warm and deep warm, instead of this like, this low level eBay copy plug type of warm sound that has tonality issues. So yeah, just know that, guys, that a lot of these cheaper plugs, they have some serious tonality issues, and you usually have to listen to sound at a very lower volume, because they just, you know, often just want to rip your head off, a lot of these cheaper plugs, especially on transistor gear. So yeah, you can decide to do that or not, whatever. Here we are over in the Macintosh era. Now we're over, I think this is like the Model 4 or 5, something like that. I'm not sure. You guys probably know that better than me. But we're still not completely up in the high class of plugs. It is better than the worst plugs. I would say it's probably like a 3 or something like that with these plugs. And these RCA plugs, a lot of brands use them, and they're like, okay, they're usable. They don't pollute the sound too much. They are acceptable. So I would say that these plugs overall are acceptable. But if you want your Macintosh MCD 275 model to shine more, to have a bit more personality, to cut a bit more through the detail without maybe using a lot of money on the tubes that would normally do that, I actually suggest, if it's possible, without damaging it and without it losing too much value, because yeah, you know how Macintosh owners are, they want to keep it original, and I fully understand that. So yeah, you have to make a decision if you want to do this. I would say it's a bit on the risky side, where you might not get really what you had potentially, what's it called, what you originally had in mind. So you might want to not do this. I don't think there will be like a dramatic difference, but I think that you will be able to hear a substantial amount if you have a pretty decent setup. But yeah, you know, we've also got these pins underneath that you potentially could clean if it was an older model, so you didn't have any of that. What do you call that air interacting with metal? I forgot the word now, but you could do this, and if I did it, I would repeat a very good success that Macintosh basically has done. I can't speak today. Has done with their Macintosh MCD 275 newer models. They have some pretty decent plugs on their newer models, and they've learned. Macintosh has learned that you get a deeper, more solid sound with good plugs. They've learned that. They've learned that. I've also written that to them several times. So finally, they're listening to me. Yeah, I'll just take credit for that, for the entire new line of Macintosh. That's all because of me. No. Yeah, I mean, Cardas is very similar to the newer Cardas, newer Macintosh plugs that they're using in most of their amps. And I have to say that, you know, Macintosh did make a good move doing that, because you don't want these China-ish types of plugs. You know, they have tonality issues, they have harshness issues, they have many other issues, and you don't want the sound to be too safe, too original, too retro. It does to some degree sound very good with the original plugs, but it also, in a way, when you've owned it for a while, listened to a lot of music, you kind of, you know, that bit of excitement and edge and like extra detail that you're missing, you're just going to be going like, I wish I made the move. So yeah, it's a bit 50-50, you know. You could do this. You could easily do this. You could put Cardas on here, perhaps Futek, CMC, but then again, you have three types of sounds, and they're all kind of better than these, but maybe not. You could also, in theory, just put Futek here, Futek here, Futek here. You could. It will definitely spice up the sound, give it more edge, give it more, perhaps better black levels. Just the structure of the music would be a lot more cool, so it would make the whole amplifier seem more like the newer version of the Macintosh MC275. So you could do that. That's up to you. Just giving you guys the possibility of kind of deciding for yourself what you want to do. So that's an interesting thing to look into. So we've got TubeGuru, and TubeGuru is generally, I would say, a brand that is a bit held back by the standard tubes and the plugs, and that's basically it. They've got some pretty good value designs, but they have a tendency of being a bit closed in, a bit too heavy, and just lacking a bit of that clarity, separation, and, you know, fully layered type of sound. So you could take it to the next level. I tried this, so that's why I know that it works. And what I did was, now we're looking at the TubeGuru 211 SE model, monoblock version, not integrated version. Yes, they made two versions. And here we have something that's similar to the Sugden 208 speaker terminals, but they're not. They're actually quite a bit better. But they're still a bit on the rough, heavy, lower level warmth type of level. You know, you potentially could get a sound that is quite a bit more evolved if you put some Audio Note Ongaku silver terminals. Those are like almost the most expensive terminals in the world. The reason why I'm suggesting these terminals is because of the size of them, the mass of them, and that they're basically the most solid, revealing terminals in the world. Now, not a lot of gear in the world can stand that type of, I will call it filtering, because when you have a plug, it functions as a filtering mechanism. And a lot of amps in the world are not good enough to handle those plugs. Generally, Audio Note silver plugs, not good enough to handle those. But in this level of tube gear, we are actually approaching definitely what's possible. So you might want to consider doing that anyway, because a lot of silver plugs, cheap silver plugs, they have a tendency of being bright, being just going like so the soundstage just becomes giant, it's hyperactive, it's harsh, it's out of control. That is why a lot of manufacturers out there don't use normal silver, rhodium, or whatever you call them, terminals. They're usually very aggressive in sound, and the only ones that I've heard that are really solid are the Audio Note ones, and especially in this order, the Ongaku ones, which are the most solid, natural silver terminals I've ever heard. Yes, they are a hell of a lot more natural and sophisticatedly warm than any copper terminals I've ever heard, even the custom made ones for the Wilson audio speakers and all these fancy big speakers that make terminals themselves, even those. So it's just a different level. And I personally think that you could do this. You could get away with this, you know. It would be so cool to get away with it. I haven't heard this particularly, but I've heard it with Audio Note silver cable inside on the signal, only on the signal, and then Audio Note silver RCA plugs. That combination in itself, and then an inlet R and Oyate gold inlet plug sounded amazing, fantastic layering. It just became a lot more clear, a lot more into that Audio Note type of sound, and it just raised the level. Like it made Tube almost go up to the ear level of sound, ear equipment, JDIS equipment, you know, that type of tube equipment. So it really elevated the sound a lot. And I believe, even though I haven't tried this yet, I believe deeply, having listened to this overly warm type of really sophisticated sound that has a lot of substance, I strongly believe that you can get away with that. Audio Note Ongaku silver terminals. That's gonna go like, it's gonna, ooh man, I can just feel it. I might be wrong, but I would have done it if I kept my Tube Guru 211 SE integrated amp. I would have done this. But the only reason why I did not do this is because I later went on to an Audio Note amplifier instead, and which is of course better. But man, do I just see a lot of potential in this amp. I listened to it for many hours a day, and by God, does it really have a lot of really cool sound, especially listening to this amp on a pretty efficient speaker. I'm talking 95 to 100 decibel efficient speaker with a relatively stable ohm curve. We're potentially talking about something that could potentially get close to Audio Note levels of sound, potentially. But it could be a dream, it could be that I'm wrong, so you have to take that into consideration, guys. And yeah, just want to tell you guys, again, with me and my considerations, so I hope I don't offend too many people by saying these things. Yeah, I believe that Maisho terminals, audio node Maisho terminals, are the second best speaker terminals in the world, and the very best value speaker terminals at the top level. They're not nearly as expensive as the Ongaku terminals. That mainly has to do with mass. There's a lot more silver in the Ongaku. They're a lot bigger. So mass. It basically is mass. That's the difference. So they are ridiculously good, and you never ever really see them on any other equipment in the world, and I find that very sad. I've heard some transistor amplifiers, some tube amplifiers with audio node Maisho terminals, silver Maisho terminals. My God, does it completely change the sound, and it just gets into this level of warmth that you never hear with normal amplifiers having normal copper terminals. I mean, sorry, you just don't get into that type of sound unless you've then probably invested, I don't know, $100,000-$300,000 in some really good power conditioning, and you've got all kinds of tricks that you've done. Perhaps you can then simulate a similar type of sound, but I mean, they are in a class of their own, audio node Maisho silver terminals. And I personally think that Otto are like a third place. I have them in my own amp, but I can feel that they're not, even though they're at third place, they're not nearly as good as the Maisho one. So I wish that I had that in my amp. So, but yeah, that's what you get when you then pay more. So that's how the game works. But yeah, I would say that CMC Gold, that is like a seriously sick good value that you're getting. And typically you would buy that off eBay, and then I think it's like, I don't know, $50 for 4 of them. Speaker terminals, seriously good. And there's a reason why a lot of people like buying Hegel gear, because Hegel is one of the few companies that discovered that CMC terminals actually sound pretty good, and they're right, you know. So good move from Hegel. It shows that they're actually listening to their own equipment. And when you see good tube amplifiers, a lot of the time somehow they have CMC gold or red copper on, mostly gold. Gold is more, so let me just try and get into it without being too weird. CMC sound is generally a very down-to-earth, raw, human-like, natural type of sound. Very free, very good at doing instruments. And when you have the gold version, it's a bit more of a warm type of sound, a bit more on the forgiving side. And when you go into the red copper one, then we get into a more raw type of sound, where it kind of puts a higher demand on the quality of components that are inside the gear. So I do not believe that CMC red copper could be used on Tube Guru gear. I could be wrong, but I haven't tried, and that's just my experience generally trying these plugs. There is a company called VBT that makes silver terminals, and yeah, under certain conditions, I would say rare conditions, they're actually pretty damn good. But I would say that the problem that I have generally with VBT silver terminals, speaker terminals, is that they have a tendency of being a bit, what's it called, a bit lame in sound, a bit heavy, a bit like, you know, when you get that German engineering type of sound where it does everything good, but there's somehow a bit of passion and humanity that's lacking. That's what I think about when I think about VBT. So I don't want to talk bad about them, not at all. They make some of the best terminals in the world, but that's why I've put them at a 6th place and not a 1st place. So just you guys know. FuruTech top terminals. I mean, FuruTech generally makes some pretty decent plugs, and FuruTech is just like, it's for a lot of people who want to listen to sound effects, who like an effect going from one stereo to the other, what's it called, one channel to the other. It's for people who like to listen to black levels. They want this like instantaneousness. They want the hi-fi aspect, the bling, the coolness. And I get that, a lot of people want that. I also used to like that at some point, but for me, it's a sort of compromise where you're getting that at the expense of the highest level of naturality and humanity. So that's why I've put it at 7th place. And I would say that Carter's, I don't know if Carter's really belongs here. Perhaps it's more like down there, but I feel that Carter's makes some generally some pretty good plugs, just not as 3D, ultra layered and sophisticated as some of the other plugs here, where when we're going from like an 8th to the 7th towards a 1st place, the level of layering and 3D and this like hologram effect is just so much better. And I feel that they're just a tiny bit muted, a tiny bit heavy. Tonality is a tiny bit off, especially with FuruTech. I would say that tonality is not their strong suit, even though they can be pretty good at it. But that's my opinion. I've heard these plugs in so many combinations on so many different pieces of gear, so I believe that I can generalize these things. And I want to say that again, CMC sounds completely different when you have it in silver rhodium. I do not think that it's the same good company sound when you have them with those plugs. They could potentially sound very good on some very limited warm gear that you want to open up, but I have I feel that somehow they end up making the sound a bit flat, where you just get this like ultra detailed sound without enough substance, without the instrument sounding good enough. So yeah, I mean, especially when you go up towards the best plugs here, we're talking about instruments that just sound so much better. And I feel that especially with FuruTech and the CMC Silver, and I wouldn't say the VBT ones. I would say that the instruments just don't really sound that good. And I'm talking about real instruments, not synthesizer keyboard instruments. I'm talking about a violin, a guitar having the perfect tone and the perfect signature, perfect real sound. So yeah, VBT, I think they use VBT silver terminals on Martin design speakers, and it creates some kind of a magical combination. VBT silver terminals and Yorma cables in the Martin design speakers, and those Aquatone ceramic speaker units. I mean, that's apparently a really sick combination, sick in a good way, That's a really cool thing, and I think that suddenly makes VBT, which is normally a bit of a dead type of sound, a hell of a lot better. So yeah, everything in the right context in order to really understand how it works. So yeah, that was kind of that. And you could experiment with fuses. Generally, I don't really recommend it. Standard fuses are usually okay, fine with tube gear. I find that fuses are more of a thing that I would use if I had transistor gear, especially if I had Macintosh transistor gear, where I think that the fuses are seriously bad quality fuses. But again, you can try a lot of different fuses and a lot of different amps, and you decide if you like that. On some gear it makes a huge difference. On others it just doesn't make a difference, because it's not on the sound signal, it's only on the mechanical part of the signal, making sure that it protects your amp and not interfering at all with the sound signature. So again, everything in the right context, you have to think about that. So yeah, I mean, with this Tube Guru stuff, on the signal side, on the RCA XLR side, I would seriously consider as a minimum the LX copper cable from AudioNote as a minimum, but more likely the SP19 cable, because that's what I had in mind. And that just really opens it up. That adds a lot more 3D, a lot more layering, the purity of the instruments. And that, when people talk about second level harmony distortion or whatever it's called, they're usually talking about crappy plugs, crappy cables, standard tubes on standard component gear, and a lot of lower level tube gear in the world, even the mid level and some of the higher level stuff, doesn't have any cable in it that comes close to this here. SPE19 AudioNote silver cables is like the start of the very best sound in the world, period. It is the best value, high level silver cable I have ever heard in my life. It costs a lot. Yeah, it costs a lot. But if you compare it to Nordost silver, a lot of the other silver on the market that actually costs a lot more, this thing just beats it in regards to especially naturality. Yeah, there aren't many threads in it, but again, threads, the more threads you have generally, the more mass you get in a sound, and the more stable it becomes, and the more natural it becomes. That is usually the rule, not always the rule. And that you could fault to the cable and say that there aren't many threads, there are only 19 threads, and because of that you could be lacking some oomph, some pressure, some intensity because of that. And that's why you might want to do it in like 2, 3, 4 runs in order for that to sound a lot better. So again, something you have to take into consideration. Everything has a certain level of truth to it within a certain level of context. So you have to know about these things. So Solderington, yeah, I mean, when you're doing all of these AudioNote tweaks, AudioNote plugs to this gear, like for example Tube Guru, you also want to go with AudioNote soldering tin because of this gear. It makes it more pure, it makes it more natural, it makes it more integrated. If it were other lower level plugs, you could get away with not doing that. So again, something you have to take into consideration. These are like, this is like the nerdy territory. So yeah, I mean, you don't want to really do anything more than that. Only like release the brakes on the equipment. But you could potentially put a higher class cable on the pot meter. That's the thing that adjusts the volume. And if it's integrated, it's on the amp. If it's not integrated, it's usually not on the amp because the preamp takes care of that. So just for you guys, so you guys know that. Okay. So I seriously would not do this. That is a pretty high risk, but you can always go back if it goes wrong. Unless you burn the whole thing to the ground, and it shouldn't happen. But again, you do this at your own risk. I've tried Inlet R, and this generally sounds good on all Tube Guru equipment. So yeah, that's a pretty safe bet. Now we've got the last amplifier here, the JJ828 tube amplifier. This is not a super good amplifier, but it has potential. It does a lot of good stuff. It's still the kind of lower, close to mid level hi-fi type of gear. Not super duper gear, but fine for the price. A lot of potential. But again, change the tubes, change the RCA ports, change the speaker terminals. That's it. Suddenly the amp is at least 1.5, more like 2 times better, and it just frees it up and it makes it more 3D, more holographic. It just doesn't have that simple tubey sitting on its ass kind of sound. It just lets go, and you just become totally involved in the sound. And yeah, fantastic. A lot of potential. But again, normal silver terminals on this amp, been there, done that. That is horrible. That will actually destroy the sound. And I know from a lot of friends who has had this amplifier that I don't know why, if this is a problem with the brand or if they just tinkered too much with it, but a lot of them had problems, stability problems, because it apparently has a pretty big circuitry inside where a lot of stuff goes on. So just know that. Just know that you could potentially be opening up a can of worms when you're doing this. So be careful with this model. It might not want to be upgraded. But I've heard it where it was upgraded and it sounded pretty damn awesome. So those are like all the things I had to cover in this video. And yeah, try and remember to like and subscribe so I can keep on making content that is like this or similar. So you guys can, just save a lot of money on doing all the good stuff, because we all want the really good stuff that makes us elevate our sound to a ridiculous level, so we don't have to use all of this crazy amount of money on hi-fi. And who knows, maybe one of these tweaks is enough for you to become a lot more interested in your own gear, so you don't have to feel that you need 10, 20, 30,000 dollars on a new speaker or amplifier. Maybe this is enough, but hey, maybe it just made you a bit more hungry, realizing that you really want that higher gear, high level of gear that's out there, whatever. I'm just giving you guys the possibility of discovering a new level of sound, so you're not stuck in that on that certain level that a lot of people can't get out of. So I hope this helps you guys, and if you could like my videos, all my videos, and subscribe, it would help a lot. I would be able to give you guys a lot more value. And having said that, that's all for now, and have a nice day.